Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I'm just an ordinary guy trying to navigate life with autism, and I've got my four-legged companion Storm helping me along the way. Storm is a border collie who's been training to become my psychiatric assistance animal for the past 8 months. We've been working together on getting him used to different environments, sounds, and situations that we'll encounter in daily life. Part of our training routine involves taking public transportation to help Storm get comfortable with crowds, noise, and staying focused on his job. That's how we ended up on what I now call the train ride from hell, a journey that taught me just how entitled some people can be. The day started normally enough. Storm and I boarded our usual morning train to the city for a training session at the shopping center. We always sit in the front car near the conductor, and I always show my documentation explaining that Storm is a psychiatric assistance animal in training. The conductor that morning was friendly and understanding when I showed him Storm's paperwork, giving us the thumbs up to settle into our usual spot. Storm did exactly what he's trained to do. He curled up under my legs, taking up as little space as possible. He's learned to make himself practically invisible when we're in public spaces. I was feeling good about how well he was handling the busy morning commute. Everything changed at the third stop when this woman and her daughter got on. The woman looked to be in her 40s with that "I want to speak to your manager" haircut. Her daughter appeared to be around 10 years old. They sat directly across the aisle from us, and I could immediately feel them staring. The daughter spotted Storm right away and started tugging on her mother's sleeve. She asked her mom excitedly if she could pet the dog, practically bouncing in her seat. Her mother told her to just go ask me directly, saying she was sure I wouldn't mind. I was trying to focus on our training exercises, but I could hear them whispering and pointing. Then the daughter got up and walked over to me. She politely asked if she could pet my dog, looking hopeful. I apologized but explained that Storm was currently in training and couldn't be petted by strangers. When she asked what kind of training, wondering if it was tricks, I explained that he was training to be a psychiatric assistance animal and that it was very important that people didn't distract him when he was working. The daughter looked confused and went back to her mother, but then I heard the woman's voice getting louder. She told her daughter to come back, adding that unfortunately some people don't know how to share. That comment made my anxiety spike immediately. Storm sensed my distress and got up from his position under my legs. He moved closer to me and rested his head on my knee. Exactly what he's trained to do when I'm getting overwhelmed. I gave him a small treat and told him he was a good boy, then asked him to lie back down. That's when Karen decided to get involved directly. She stood up and walked over to us. She told me I should be teaching the dog to interact with children instead of rewarding him for being antisocial. She complained that her daughter just wanted to give him a little pat, and that I was being incredibly rude. I tried to explain that he wasn't being antisocial but was actually working. I told her I had rewarded him for doing his job correctly, which was to focus on me when I was having anxiety. I asked her to please leave us alone. Karen accused me of lying about Storm being some kind of service animal. She claimed that real service dogs were Labradors because they were the only breed smart enough for that kind of work. She said Storm was obviously just a border collie, which were farm dogs, and told me to stop making up stories to get special treatment. The confrontation was triggering all my anxiety responses, and Storm immediately picked up on it. He got up again and this time climbed onto my lap, something he only does when I'm having a severe anxiety episode. I reached into my treat pouch to reward him for responding correctly, but before I could grab a treat, Karen actually reached into my pouch and took one herself. She gave it to Storm and praised him, saying he was a good boy and that he liked her just fine. Having a stranger invade my personal space, touch my dog without permission, and interfere with his training sent me into complete panic mode. I screamed at her to get away from us and not to touch my dog. I was crying and shaking, unable to control my reaction. Other passengers were staring and I felt completely humiliated. The train made an unscheduled stop and within minutes, 3 police officers boarded. They quickly assessed the situation and moved Karen and her daughter to a different car. One officer stayed with me for the rest of the journey, helping me calm down and making sure Storm could complete his job of bringing my anxiety under control. When we reached the city terminus, I was talking to the conductor about filing a report when I spotted Karen and her daughter again. They had been waiting for us to get off the train. The daughter came running straight toward us, announcing loudly that her mom had said she could pet Storm now since the mean police weren't there. Before I could react, she reached out and tried to grab Storm's leash right out of my hand. I had to make a split-second decision to protect both Storm and myself. I told her no, reminding her that I had already said no before. I dropped the leash and gave Storm his emergency command, telling him there was danger. He immediately ran to his safe position under a bench in the middle of the platform, just like we'd practiced. But Karen wasn't done with us yet. She walked over and actually pushed me in the shoulder, demanding to know how I dared to let my dog run away from her daughter. She yelled that her daughter just wanted to pet him. My fight or flight response kicked in and I pushed her back. She lost her balance and fell down hard on the platform. Her daughter started screaming and more police officers appeared almost instantly. I called Storm back to me and handed over all his documentation to the officers. They listened to my account of what happened, reviewed the train's security footage, and spoke to witnesses who had seen the whole thing unfold. Karen was arrested for assault and interference with a service animal in training. Her daughter was picked up by what I assume was her father, who looked absolutely mortified when the officers explained what had happened. The officers were incredibly professional and understanding. They recognized that I had acted in self-defense after being physically assaulted, and they made sure Storm and I got safely to our destination. 3 weeks later, I received a call from the prosecutor's office. Karen had been charged with assault, interference with a service animal, and harassment. She tried to claim that I was faking Storm's status as a service animal in training by the documentation from my doctor, Storm's trainer, and the video evidence from the train proved otherwise. She ended up pleading guilty to all charges and was ordered to pay a fine, complete community service, and take a class about disability rights. She was also banned from that train line for 6 months. Storm passed his final certification exam 2 months later. He's now officially my psychiatric assistance animal, and we ride that same train route regularly. We've never seen Karen again, but several of the regular commuters recognize us and always make sure we have plenty of space. When I was a sophomore, I was just trying to survive high school like everyone else. I kept to myself, did my homework, and tried not to cause any trouble. That's when this junior girl started targeting me for absolutely no reason. She would stare at me with pure hatred in her eyes, and I had never even spoken to her before. Our classrooms were close to each other, and when the junior classes got out a few minutes before the final bell, they would walk through our hallway. That's when the nightmare began. She would give me dirty looks, roll her eyes, and make nasty comments under her breath. I was completely confused because the semester had just started, and I couldn't figure out what I had done wrong. Things got worse quickly. She had this group of friends who looked like they crawled out from under a bridge, and together they made my life hell. They spread rumors about me, made rude comments, and even started making weird grunting sounds whenever they saw me in the hallways. This went on for my entire sophomore year and continued into my junior year. I felt trapped in my own school. Finally, my senior year brought some peace. She and her gang of misfits moved on, and I could actually walk through the halls without feeling like I was going to be attacked. I thought I had seen the last of her forever. A few years later, I had graduated and moved on with my life. My older sister had become the manager of a coffee shop downtown. One day, she mentioned that she had hired a new employee who went to the same high school as me. My sister told me she had hired someone new that day who had gone to my high school. When I asked for the name, she told me without hesitation. I immediately looked her up on social media. My heart stopped when I saw the profile picture. It was her, my high school tormentor. I called my sister right away and told her that the girl she just hired had made my life miserable in high school. My sister said it was crazy. She told me that the new employee had been showing up late every day since she started, and my sister had already given her a warning. The girl had explained that she really needed the job because she was broke. I laughed at the irony. Here she was, struggling to keep a job while I was doing great. My sister and I started talking and we came up with a plan. My sister told me that she was scheduled to work a shift where the other employees were actually friends of mine from high school. They had their own bad experiences with her and couldn't stand her either. She acted completely different when the manager was around, putting on a fake nice act. The day came for our plan. I put on one of my sister's coffee shop uniforms and walked in pretending to be the new manager. My sister was hiding in the back office, watching everything through the security cameras. I introduced myself to the other employees as the new manager, and they were trying not to laugh because they knew what was about to happen. Then she walked in for her shift. When she saw me, I could tell she recognized me, but wasn't quite sure from where. I told her I was the new manager and that I needed to ask her some questions about her performance. Her face showed confusion and a little bit of fear. I asked her if she remembered me. She stared at me for a long moment before saying that yes, she remembered, but the past was the past. I grinned as I told her the past was the past, but I remembered her making my life hell for 2 years straight. That's when one of my friends from high school came out from behind the counter and asked if she remembered her too. Her face went completely white when she realized she was surrounded by people she had bullied. I told her I wanted to know why she had treated us so horribly since we had never done anything to her. Instead of apologizing or explaining herself, she completely lost it. She started screaming that we were all just bitter witches and that she had never liked the stupid job anyway. She began throwing things around the coffee shop. She grabbed napkin dispensers and threw them on the floor, knocked over chairs, and then picked up this big decorative vase and smashed it on the ground. That's when my sister made her entrance, along with her boyfriend who happened to be a police officer. My sister fired her on the spot and told her to get out of the shop. The police officer began reading her rights, telling her she had the right to remain silent and that anything she said could be used against her in court. Her face when the handcuffs clicked on her wrists was absolutely perfect. Everyone in the coffee shop was staring when she was led away, still screaming about how we were all terrible people. After she was gone, we all worked together to clean up the mess she had made. My sister paid for the broken vase out of her own pocket, even though it wasn't her fault. She apologized to everyone for the drama and said she had no idea the girl was such a psycho. A few months later, I got the best news of all. She had been charged with destruction of property and harassment. The damages came to thousands of dollars, and she was sentenced to 100 hours of community service. My sister had pressed full charges and made sure to mention that she had a history of bullying behavior. The girl who had made my high school years miserable finally got what was coming to her. 7 years ago, I was a cashier at a big retail store. The name rhymes with Sky Marshall, if you catch my drift. I had been there for about 2 years at that point, working my way up from stock boy to register duty. I had developed quite a reputation among my co-workers for not taking any nonsense from difficult customers. If someone wanted to throw attitude my way, they'd get it right back. Management knew this about me, which is probably why they called me over when things got interesting. It was a regular Tuesday afternoon when I first spotted them. A well-dressed man in an expensive suit walked in with 3 women trailing behind him. They all looked like they had money, fancy clothes, perfect hair, and so on. Each of them grabbed a shopping cart and spread out across the store like they owned the place. I watched them from my register when they filled their carts with high-end merchandise. We're talking designer shoes, leather boots, fancy handbags, winter coats, all the expensive stuff that usually sits on the shelves collecting dust. The women were loud and demanding, snapping their fingers at employees and acting like they were doing us a favor by shopping there. About 30 minutes later, my coordinator walked over to me with that look on his face that meant trouble was coming. He told me I needed to handle that group when they were ready to check out because they had specifically requested someone experienced. I told him sure thing and that this should be interesting. The coordinator walked away, and I prepared myself for what was about to happen. When they finally rolled up to my register with their 3 overflowing carts, I could already tell this wasn't going to be a normal transaction. I started scanning their items one by one. Designer shoes worth $400, handbags that cost more than my monthly rent, boots that probably cost more than my car payment. The whole time the women were making snide comments and treating me like I was beneath them. One of them told me to make sure I was careful with those bags because they were worth more than I make in a month. Another one asked if I could go any faster because they had places to be. The third one said she hoped I knew how to work that machine properly. I just kept scanning and ignored their comments. I've dealt with entitled customers before, but these 3 were something special. The man in the suit stayed quiet, but I could see him getting more nervous when the total climbed higher. When I finally finished scanning everything, the register displayed the total in big, bold numbers. I told them their total came to $3,047. The man reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick wad of cash. All $100 bills, and they looked brand new. Too new, if you ask me. Something about them just felt off. The way they were all perfectly crisp, the way they all looked exactly the same, it set off alarm bells in my head. I told them I needed to check these bills real quick. I took the stack of money and walked over to our counterfeit detection machine. We had to check any large cash transactions, especially when something seemed suspicious. I fed the first bill into the machine and waited. The red light flashed. Fake. I tried the second bill. Red light again. I walked back to the register where they were all waiting impatiently. I told them I was sorry, but I couldn't accept this money. Before I could even explain why, one of the women cut me off with the nastiest tone I'd ever heard. She asked what I meant I couldn't accept it and said it was money, wasn't it? Then she told me to just take the money and do my damn job. That's when it clicked for me. She wanted me to do my job? Fine, I do exactly that. I told her she was absolutely right and that I get my manager so he could help us out. I walked away from the register with the fake money in hand, leaving them standing there. I found my manager in the break room and explained the situation. His eyes went wide when I showed him the bills. He asked if I was sure about this. I told him to run them through the machine himself. He did, and sure enough, every single bill came back as counterfeit. According to store policy, when we suspect someone is using fake money, we have to try to keep them there while we call the police. My manager went to the office to make the call. I walked back to the register where the group was getting more agitated by the minute. One of them asked where I had been and said they didn't have all day. The man asked if there was a problem here. I told them my manager was just double-checking everything and that he'd be right out. The man's face had gone pale, and I could see sweat starting to form on his forehead. He kept looking toward the exit, like he was thinking about making a run for it. That's when I saw them. 2 police officers walked through the front entrance and headed straight towards us. The look on the man's face was absolutely gold. Pure terror, mixed with the realization that his little scheme was about to come crashing down. One of the officers said they got a call about suspected counterfeit currency. My manager confirmed that was right and explained that this gentleman tried to pay for over $3,000 worth of merchandise with fake bills. The officers took my statement while the group stood there in shock. The man was trying to play innocent, but the women weren't handling it as well. Karen said this was ridiculous and that the money was real. She claimed I didn't know what I was talking about. The second woman demanded to speak to the store manager. The third one said they couldn't treat paying customers like this. One of the officers told them they had confirmed that the bills were counterfeit and that they were all under arrest for attempted fraud. That's when things got really interesting. When the officers started handcuffing them, Karen completely lost it. She screamed that this was all my fault and called me an incompetent little brat. She said she was going to sue this store and get me fired. She was screaming and cursing at me while the officer was trying to get the handcuffs on her. I had to respond. I told her in the most polite voice I could manage that she had told me to do my job and I was just following her instructions. The rage on her face was something I'll never forget. She tried to lunge toward me, but the officer held her back. The officer told her that was enough, and she was making this worse for herself. When they were being led away, I could hear Karen still screaming about lawyers and lawsuits. The other women were crying and the man just looked defeated. When they were gone, my manager came over to me. He said it was a good catch and that it could have been a real problem for the store. I told him I was just doing my job like the lady said. The whole thing made quite a story around the store. Word got around about what happened, and I became something of a legend among my co-workers. Customers were a little more polite to me after that, probably worried about what might happen if they pushed their luck. A few weeks later, I found out from a police officer who came by the store that the group had been running the same scam at stores all over the city. They'd stolen thousands of dollars worth of merchandise before we caught them. The fake money was surprisingly good quality, which is why they'd gotten away with it for so long. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.